Today, we're looking at Robert Oster's Chocolate. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Chocolate is a brown ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put the ink into a Pier Cardin President with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. And up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, I put it immediately into water for 10 to 15 seconds, and we see it immediately flees straight up the page. We get a very light pink, a much darker pink, and then this really neat highlighter blue that's coming across the top. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I put it into the water. It looks exactly the same, which is giving us the idea that we're going to get zero water resistance from this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean out of your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, we see that it immediately feathers out and becomes quite blurry in a couple spots. Looking at the I and looking at the H, I would not want to have to highlight this ink. But there's good news that comes with it when we look at the water test. Water completely reactivates and pulls almost all of the ink off the page, meaning you shouldn't need anything more than water to remove this from the pen. Pen flush does very much the same thing as water, pulls it all off the page. In fact, in both the water and pen flush, I can see the dots from the Rhodia paper through what remains. Bleach, as expected, completely obliterates the ink on the paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Chocolate has a viscosity of 1.39. That makes it super wet. It didn't cross the 1.3 line, but it is way down there. It's chasing water. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. I average those. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Chocolate has an average dry time of 13 seconds, which makes it still normal. It's on the edge of normal, but faster than normal, and considering how wet this ink was, that's pretty good. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does have minor haloing. No sheen. No real shade. I say no real shade because there's moments of little shade. The bottom of the O gives a little shade. The inside of the R gives a little shade, and that's it. The extra fine has the same tone that I got from the 1.1. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, and 9 seconds to dry. The medium gave us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, but we do get shading throughout the writing. Nice shading throughout the writing. Ignoring where my thumb goes, I see it in brown, I see it in jumps, I see it in lazy and dog, but 16 seconds to dry. Now when I look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows I should be seeing shading here, and I don't. The medium shows the shading that I do get in the writing, and the smear test says you can likely recover this. Now I need you to stop and look at this color called chocolate, or magenta. They call it chocolate. I wouldn't call it a chocolate brown. Looking at Tomoe River, we get no bleeding, we do get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. I was obviously really writing bad. My writing's not especially good, but wow, was that bad. I struggle some days with the stubs.
Extra fine gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 13 seconds to dry. 13 seconds is a long time to wait on a color that I'm not enjoying. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, and 19 seconds to dry. Nothing like waiting even longer for it. The scrubby shows us no color variation in either of these nibs, which we didn't get in the writing. The smear test says don't write on Tomoe River if you're going to accidentally smear, so plan your accidents accordingly. I don't know. Rhodia paper gives us no bleed, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. Yep. It's supposed to be a brown ink. Brown ink's supposed to, normally do pretty good. Extra fine gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 7 seconds to dry. The medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 12 seconds to dry. The scrubby confirms what we got in the writing samples, that we do not get any color variation, although if on the medium scrub you look far left to far right, it looks like you should. Maybe if I put this under a microscope I would see some color variation, but to the naked eye, no, you don't. But you could recover it if you smeared it. Now the paper I can't pronounce, Momokaki, Momokaki. It's a nice thin paper. I like the tone of the paper. Other than where I put it on, really thick in the scrubby, I get no bleeding. I do get ghosting because it's a very thin paper. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, minor halo, no sheen, no shading. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and we do get shading here. I think the tone of this paper made it pretty nice. I'm just looking. It didn't take a whole lot longer for the Rhodia. 8 seconds to dry, but we do get nice shading here. The medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and we do get shading. This paper is bringing out the shading on this ink, and very nicely. 11 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both the extra fine and the medium show us that we can expect some color variation, and quite a bit. And we are seeing the same amount of color variation in the writing. This paper did just really, really good to bring that all out. It made one hell of a good show. I think I need to move this mic. See how that, nope, no good. I can't hear me. It just started to rub on the shirt and it was creating noise. So that was going on an awful lot in this, because I try to monitor my audio while I'm recording. It gives me an idea if this stuff's going to happen. If it happened, I'm sorry. The color variation I see in a scrubby I do get in a writing sample, and in a smear test I could recover this. So I went and I tested word paper, the word notebooks. The word today is bleeding. On to the next page. The other word today is ghosting. This paper is haunted. The top was written with a medium, and it definitely did spread, it definitely did feather, it definitely does not halo, it definitely does not shade, it definitely does not sheen. The extra fine definitely doesn't look like an extra fine, looks like a medium. It definitely feathers. No halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows no line variation. At least if you smeared, you can't smear. The problem is it touches the page underneath. So even in a carry-around notebook, this wouldn't work for you because you're only getting a quarter of the pages. Say half when you're turning the page because you can only use one side. But if you're going to start touching the other side, you get a quarter to a third of the papers. So I went to test 20-pound copier paper because, hey, if it doesn't work well on this that's a little thicker, what happens when we use some really crappy paper? Well, we get tons of bleeding to the page underneath, and we get tons of ghosting, and that's, but we come across this stuff at work. The medium definitely spreads and feathers. It has no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine definitely becomes more like a medium. A lot of definitelys in here. definitely said definitely a lot on this one. Definitely sorry last time. The extra fine has no feather, has feather, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation. The smear test says, hey, good news, it dries immediately. Because again, when I do that, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, smear. I don't give it a second to try and set up. I just want to know what happens if I smear it immediately. Will I be able to recover what I wrote? So that's what I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Chocolate, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I chose Noodler's Socrates because it's a wonderful violet or purple ink. Now, before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Robert Oster Chocolate? Well, I said it's a brown ink. It's much more of a magenta brown. A lot more magenta than brown. A lot more magenta than I imagine chocolate being. And perhaps in Australia, chocolate is much more of a magenta color. I have no problem with the color of this ink, just that it's called chocolate. I really didn't care for. But the ink itself performs really well. It's the name I get hung up on and then don't really want. Thanks for watching.